Officer Derek Tilman had been with the Scottsdale Police Department for 11 years when he pulled into a suburban neighborhood and encountered a situation that would destroy his career and cost the city $2.4 million in settlement money. He was 39 years old, experienced enough to understand the constitutional boundaries of his authority, but apparently convinced that his instincts about suspicious people were infallible. One Saturday evening in a gated community northwest of Scottsdale, Tilman responded to a call about a black man following a white woman through the neighborhood. What Tilman did next, arriving with assumptions already formed, dismissing evidence that contradicted his narrative, and arresting a man for the crime of being married, would become a textbook example of how racial profiling operates, even when the victim's status should have immediately stopped the encounter. The case would expose not just one officer's failures, but a department that had repeatedly ignored complaints about his discriminatory policing practices. Marcus Williams, a 8-year-old cardiac surgeon, was walking through his own neighborhood with his wife of 20 years, returning from an evening at a neighbor's dinner party. His wedding ring was visible on his hand, his designer watch catching the fading Arizona sunlight, his demeanor comfortable and at ease on the street where he'd lived since 2004. Nothing about the moment suggested any wrongdoing, any threat, any violation of law. But to someone in that neighborhood, or someone who called police, Marcus Williams' presence, specifically his blackness, in a space coded as white, exclusive, and protected, was enough to trigger a call that would end in handcuffs and years of legal battles. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. What happens next reveals how an officer's assumptions override facts, how a neighborhood's unspoken biases become police action, and how even 20 years of building a life in one place isn't enough to guarantee you'll be left alone. Regency Heights sits in the foothills northwest of Scottsdale, Arizona, a gated community of sprawling homes on multi-acre lots, each property valued between $800,000 and $2.3 million. It's the kind of neighborhood where gates matter, where security is spelled out in homeowners association rules and private patrol contracts, where residents carefully curate who belongs and who doesn't. The community is predominantly white, approximately 87% according to census data, with a median household income of $187,000. The streets are lined with desert landscaping, native saguaro cacti, and stone walls that separate properties from the world outside. Regency Heights was built in the 1992 as an aspirational community for high-income professionals, doctors, lawyers, entrepreneurs, executives at nearby tech companies. It was 7:15 p.m. on a Saturday in April. The Arizona heat was finally beginning to fade as the sun descended behind the McDowell Mountains. The neighborhood was quiet, the way it always was. On weekend evenings, people inside homes with air conditioning cranked against the remaining heat, or gathered on patios under misters and shade structures. Marcus and Jennifer Williams were returning from dinner at the home of Robert and Michelle Chen, neighbors 2 streets over. They'd walked over on foot, a 15-minute stroll through the neighborhood they'd called home for 2 decades. The route took them past the gatehouse, down Regency Drive, through the Commons area with its decorative fountain and seating area, then onto the residential streets where their home was located. They were laughing about something Robert had said over dessert. Jennifer's arm linked through Marcus's as they walked. The kind of evening that felt normal, unremarkable, safe. It was exactly the kind of evening where nothing dramatic typically happens in a neighborhood like Regency Heights. Marcus James Williams had been a cardiac surgeon at Scottsdale Heart Institute for 19 years. 19 years of performing complex surgeries, evaluating patients for transplant eligibility, leading a team of surgical nurses and resident physicians, managing cases that involved life or death decisions made in real time. He'd performed over 3,400 successful surgeries. He'd trained 47 resident physicians who'd gone on to careers at major medical centers across the country. He'd published research on minimally invasive cardiac procedures in journals like the Journal of Thoracic Surgery and Circulation. His colleagues called him meticulous. His patients called him the surgeon who saved their lives. His department chair called him the foundation of the surgical program. Marcus had graduated from Howard University with a degree in chemistry at age 20, completed his medical degree at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, where he'd graduated in the top 5% of his class, and completed his surgical residency at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, one of the most competitive programs in the country. He'd received a fellowship in cardiothoracic surgery at the University of Michigan, where he'd trained under one of the nation's leading transplant surgeons. He held board certification in surgery and cardiothoracic surgery from the American Board of Medical Specialties. He'd received the Scottsdale Heart Institute's Distinguished Physician Award in 2015, the American Heart Association's Physician Excellence Award in 2019, and been named one of Arizona's top cardiologists by Desert Lifestyle magazine for 5 consecutive years. At 48 years old, Marcus Williams was exactly where he'd worked to be: established, respected, financially secure, and living a life that reflected 2 decades of discipline and achievement. He'd met Jennifer at medical school. She was pursuing her master's degree in public health, and they'd married in 2004 at Howard University's chapel. They had 2 adult children, both in college. Their son was pre-med at University of Arizona. Their daughter was studying engineering at Arizona State University. Marcus and Jennifer had built a life in Scottsdale that was intentional and hard-earned. The house they owned outright, the charitable work they did through the Scottsdale Community Foundation, their memberships in the Scottsdale Country Club and the Phoenix Arts Museum. They were the kind of couple who hosted dinner parties, belonged to social organizations, donated to local causes. They were, in every way that mattered in their community, exactly where they belonged. That Saturday, Marcus had spent the morning at Scottsdale Heart Institute reviewing patient files before the following week's surgery schedule. He'd returned home at 1 p.m. and spent the afternoon in his study, preparing a presentation for a medical conference in San Francisco the following month. Jennifer had spent the morning at the community center where she volunteered as a health education coordinator, teaching nutrition and wellness classes to underserved populations. They'd both showered and changed into casual but nice clothes, Marcus wearing navy linen pants and a white button-down shirt, Jennifer wearing a summer dress. At 6:45 p.m., they'd walked together to the Chen's home, a route they'd taken dozens of times over the years. They'd had dinner with people they'd known for 8 years, people they considered friends. They'd decided to walk home rather than call a car, wanting to enjoy the cooling evening and the quiet of the neighborhood. But to someone in Regency Heights that evening, Marcus Williams' presence was a problem, and someone had decided to do something about it. Derek Tilman was 39 years old. He'd been with the Scottsdale Police Department for 11 years. He was conscientious about his work, by all supervisory accounts, and deeply concerned about what he called neighborhood safety and community protection. His evaluations noted that he was results-oriented but sometimes lacked sensitivity regarding racial dynamics and community relations. He'd been flagged multiple times by his sergeant for needing to improve his de-escalation approach. What supervisors described in coded language was hypervigilance toward people of color in affluent neighborhoods. In 11 years, with the Scottsdale Police Department, Derek Tilman had compiled a record that should have raised immediate concerns. 9 complaints. 9. 7 of them involved allegations of racial profiling or discriminatory treatment of Hispanic and Black community members. 3 had been sustained, resulting in written reprimands and mandatory diversity training. The other 6 had been closed with insufficient evidence findings, despite witness statements and circumstantial documentation. Tilman had a pattern. He responded aggressively to calls involving people of color in spaces where he didn't think they belonged. A Black family visiting a predominantly white resort. Tilman detained them for investigation after a call about suspicious guests, then released them when the resort confirmed their booking. A Hispanic teenager jogging through Scottsdale's downtown area. Tilman stopped him, questioned him about where he was going and where he'd come from, then let him go after checking his ID. A Black woman and her white daughter shopping at an upscale mall. Tilman questioned the woman about whether the child was actually her daughter, after a store employee called about possible shoplifting, then backed off when the woman demanded to speak to the manager. The pattern was clear. The documentation was extensive. But somehow Tilman remained on patrol. His supervisors noted the concerns in evaluations but took no meaningful action. At 6:58 p.m. that Saturday evening, Tilman received a dispatch call. A woman calling from Regency Heights, reported that a black man was following her through the neighborhood. The caller was agitated, claiming the man was walking directly behind her and had been for several minutes. In Tilman's mind, this matched a pattern he believed in: black men in white neighborhoods with suspicious intent. He didn't consider that the neighborhood was public, that people of all races had the legal right to walk on public streets, that the caller might be experiencing bias rather than danger. He didn't think about alternative explanations. He just responded. Tilman arrived at the intersection of Regency Drive and Canyonside Lane at 7:08 p.m., less than 10 minutes after the call came in. His mind had already filled in a narrative: suspicious, black male, predatory behavior, threat to community safety. He scanned the neighborhood and immediately saw what he was looking for: a black man and a white woman walking together on the sidewalk. In Tilman's mind, that confirmed everything. The man was following the woman. It had to be. He pulled his patrol car to the curb, lights off, and stepped out. Do you think officers should face consequences for arrests made based solely on community biases rather than evidence? Drop your answer below. Marcus and Jennifer were laughing about something, walking down Regency Drive in the cooling evening, when they became aware of a patrol car pulling to the curb ahead of them. An officer stepped out, positioning himself between them and their intended path. Marcus and Jennifer stopped walking. Marcus's first instinct was confusion. They weren't doing anything wrong. Jennifer's instinct was something closer to dread. She'd felt this feeling before, though never with Marcus, never in their own neighborhood. "Sir, step away from that woman right now." Marcus blinked. "Your wife? That woman didn't mention a husband. You're following her." "Officer, we live together. We've been married 20 years. Check my ID. We're neighbors. We were just at dinner at the Chen's house 2 streets over." "I don't care about your ID right now. You're harassing her. Step away, or I'm placing you under arrest." Marcus's shock was giving way to anger, but he kept his voice level. "You're making a terrible mistake. We're together. Ask her yourself. Ask my wife." The officer turned to Jennifer, his hand resting on his belt near his citation book. "Ma'am, is this man bothering you?" "No, he's my husband. This is ridiculous. We were just at dinner together." "Then why did someone call and report him for following you?" "I didn't call anyone. I don't know who called. We were just walking home." This is where bias becomes impenetrable. Marcus and Jennifer had done everything right. They were together. They were calm. They were in their own neighborhood. Jennifer was actively contradicting the premise of the call. The evidence was standing right there in front of Officer Tilman. A married couple, arms linked, laughing together, wearing nice clothes from a dinner party, in a neighborhood where they'd lived for 20 years. The contradiction between the call and reality couldn't have been more obvious. But Tilman's mind had already formed a narrative, and evidence that contradicted that narrative didn't challenge it. It was filtered through it. If Jennifer said she didn't call, maybe she was scared. If they looked comfortable together, maybe it was an act. If they claimed to live in the neighborhood, maybe they were lying. Marcus pulled out his wallet and retrieved his driver's license. "Here. Scottsdale address, Regency Heights. That's where we live. That's our home. Call my wife if you don't believe me. Call the Chens. They can verify we were at their house." Tilman glanced at the ID and handed it back without really examining it. "ID doesn't prove you live there. Anyone can have a fake ID with an address on it. You need to step back from this woman." Jennifer spoke up, her voice tighter now. "Officer, this is our neighborhood. We've lived here for 20 years. My name is Jennifer Williams. My driver's license is in my purse. We're not committing any crime. We were having dinner with friends and walking home. That's all." Tilman's jaw tightened. He wasn't listening to Jennifer's words. He was listening to his assumptions. A black man in a white neighborhood. A call about suspicious behavior. The woman's attempts to defend him must mean she was intimidated. The entire scenario had to mean something criminal was happening. "Someone called about a black man following a white woman. That's exactly what I'm seeing. So we're going to clear this up right now at the station." Marcus felt his stomach drop. He'd been a successful professional his entire life, but he understood in that moment what was happening. His status, his credentials, his wife's contradiction of the allegations, none of it mattered because Tilman had already decided what was happening before he'd stepped out of his patrol car. This is where assumptions become accusations, and accusations become arrests. Officer Tilman had responded to a call that contained no description, no specific threat, no indication of actual criminal behavior. A woman walking through a neighborhood. A man also walking through a neighborhood. They happened to be different races, and in Tilman's mind, that was enough. He didn't need evidence. He didn't need verification. He had his narrative, and he would adjust reality to fit it, rather than adjust his narrative to match reality. The street had gone quiet. It was Saturday evening. Residents were inside homes or on patios, but the moment had drawn attention. Mrs. Chen, who'd been inside her home, saw the patrol car through her front window and stepped outside. A neighbor across the street, recognizing the Williamses, pulled out his phone and started recording. At least 3 household members now had clear views of what was happening. "Officer, can I ask why you're assuming this is a problem?" Jennifer's voice had shifted, no longer pleading or confused, but firm. "I'm telling you we're together. I'm telling you nothing wrong is happening." Tilman ignored her. He stepped closer to Marcus. "I need you to place your hands behind your back." "For what?" "I haven't done anything. My wife is telling you we're together. You can explain that at the station. Hands behind your back, now." Marcus understood his options in real time. He could refuse and risk violence from an officer who'd already shown he wasn't listening to reason. Or he could comply, document the abuse, and deal with the consequences. He chose compliance. "I'm going to comply. Everyone here is witnessing this. I'm not resisting. I'm complying under protest because this officer is arresting me for walking with my wife." He placed his hands behind his back. Tilman pulled out his handcuffs and snapped them on. Marcus remained calm, his voice steady. "This is false arrest. My wife is on record saying we're together. There's no crime here. Officer, what's your name? I want your badge number." Tilman recited his information as he guided Marcus toward the patrol car. Mrs. Chen called out from her porch. "That's wrong. I know them. They've been married for 20 years. They're my neighbors." Tilman opened the back door of his patrol car. He didn't acknowledge Mrs. Chen. Marcus slid into the back seat of the patrol car, his hands still cuffed behind him. Tilman closed the door. Through the window, Marcus could see Jennifer standing on the street, her hand over her mouth, watching her husband being taken away. Mrs. Chen was walking toward Jennifer, her phone still recording. Several other residents were appearing in driveways and on patios, the commotion having drawn attention from people who'd been inside. Marcus knew what would happen next. He'd be taken to the station. He'd be booked for a crime he hadn't committed. There would be paperwork, processing, interrogation, the entire apparatus of the criminal justice system deployed against him for the offense of walking down a street with his wife. Tilman got in the front seat and pulled away from the curb, tires crunching on the Arizona gravel shoulder. As they drove away from Regency Heights, Marcus looked back at the neighborhood he'd built his life in. Everything was about to change. Should officers be permitted to arrest someone based solely on a call with no description matching an alleged crime? Let me know what you think. Officer Derek Tilman processed Marcus Williams at the Scottsdale Police Department's main station. He completed the arrest report, charging him with disorderly conduct and harassment, vague charges that would take months to resolve. Marcus was booked, his mugshot was taken, his personal effects were inventoried. He asked for his phone call, and the desk sergeant directed him to a holding cell while paperwork was completed. Marcus called Jennifer. She was already on her way to the station with Mrs. Chen, who'd insisted on driving. Jennifer had called an attorney, a criminal defense lawyer named Robert Patterson, who'd represented several professional clients over the years. Patterson was furious when Jennifer explained the situation. By the time Marcus was being processed, Patterson was already on his way to the station. Lieutenant Sarah Vasquez arrived at the Scottsdale Police Department at 8:47 p.m., 99 minutes after Marcus's arrest. Vasquez was a 24-year veteran of the Scottsdale Police Department who'd been promoted to lieutenant 3 years earlier, specifically to oversee community relations and officer conduct issues. She was African American, a former Army officer, and someone who'd seen enough officer mistakes to recognize one immediately. Someone flagged the Marcus Williams case to her with a note: possible false arrest, racial profiling, credible civilian witnesses contradicting the arrest narrative. Vasquez pulled the arrest report and read Tilman's account. Then she looked at the dispatch recording of the original call. The recording was damning. The original caller, whose identity was preserved in the dispatch system, had reported a black man following a white woman, but had provided no actual description of threatening behavior, no indication of a crime, no substantiation whatsoever. Just race and gender and assumption. Vasquez walked to the holding cells where Marcus was waiting. She introduced herself and asked what had happened. Marcus explained everything. The dinner party, the walk home, Tilman's immediate assumption, the complete lack of any criminal behavior. Is your wife available to confirm this account? She's in the lobby. She's been here for 20 minutes. Vasquez found Jennifer Williams in the lobby, accompanied by Mrs. Chen and attorney Robert Patterson. She spoke to Jennifer first, then Mrs. Chen, then reviewed the recording Mrs. Chen had made on her phone. The video was clear. Marcus and Jennifer walking together, smiling, then Marcus showing his ID, then Tilman escalating anyway, then the arrest. Patterson stepped forward. This is a wrongful arrest. My client has done nothing wrong. His wife was with him. A neighbor was watching. There's video evidence. And, according to the dispatch recording, the original caller reported no actual crime, just the presence of a black man in the neighborhood. Vasquez's expression hardened. She turned and walked directly to Derek Tilman's desk. Officer Tilman, I need to see you in my office immediately. Tilman followed Vasquez into her office. She closed the door and gestured for him to sit. Tilman sat, and Vasquez placed her hand on the desk between them. You arrested Marcus Williams for disorderly conduct and harassment based on a call reporting that a black man was walking in the neighborhood. That's it. That's the entire basis for your arrest. His wife was with him. She denied everything. A neighbor was recording. Do you understand what you've done? Tilman's face went pale. I responded to a call about suspicious behavior. Suspicious behavior. Walking while black. That's what you're telling me. A man walking down a public street with his wife in the neighborhood where he lives, confirmed by his driver's license, and you arrested him because someone called 911 with a racist premise, and you never questioned it. I was responding to, you arrested a cardiac surgeon, a man who's lived in this community for 20 years, who's married to the woman you thought he was following, and you did it because your bias confirmed what the caller's bias told you to see. Give me your badge and your weapon, effective immediately. Tilman reached for his badge, his hands shaking. Lieutenant, I was just trying to... You made an assumption and called it police work. You're on administrative leave pending investigation for civil rights violations and discriminatory policing practices. Give me your badge. Tilman unclipped his badge and removed his service weapon. Vasquez placed them on her desk. For the first time, Tilman seemed to understand what he'd done and what it would cost him. Vasquez walked back to the lobby where Marcus and Jennifer were waiting. She looked directly at Marcus. Mr. Williams, on behalf of the Scottsdale Police Department, I sincerely apologize. This arrest should never have happened. Your wife's statement was clear. Witness testimony contradicts the entire premise of the arrest. Officer Tilman responded to a call based on race rather than conduct, and he made an arrest without probable cause. Marcus nodded. I want a formal apology in writing. I want the charges dropped immediately, and I want to know how many other people he's arrested based on the same bias. Attorney Patterson stepped in. My client is prepared to pursue a civil rights claim against Officer Tilman, the department, and the city. We'll also be requesting full disclosure of Officer Tilman's complaint history and prior incidents involving racial profiling. Vasquez didn't blink. I'll make sure you have everything you need. The charges are being dropped as of now. I'm ordering a full investigation into Officer Tilman's conduct, and I'm recommending termination. Should officers with documented patterns of racial profiling face automatic termination rather than investigation? Drop your answer. Within 2 hours, the story had exploded across social media. Mrs. Chen's video was shared and reshared. Multiple angles, clear audio, obvious injustice. By midnight, the story had been picked up by local news. By Sunday morning, it was national. Black surgeon arrested for walking with wife. Police assumed he was following her. Cardiac surgeon wrongfully arrested after officer's racial profiling. I've been married 20 years. This is unacceptable. Cardiac surgeon sues after false arrest. The outrage was immediate and intense. The FBI issued a statement indicating they were reviewing the arrest under civil rights violation protocols. The Arizona Medical Association called for accountability. Patient advocacy groups pointed out that Marcus Williams' arrest record would appear on background checks despite the charges being false. The Scottsdale Police Department was forced to issue a statement distancing itself from Tilman's actions. The arrest of Dr. Marcus Williams did not meet departmental standards and does not reflect our commitment to constitutional policing and community relations. Within 72 hours, Derek Tilman's career had begun to implode. Local news outlets obtained his personnel file, which showed his 9 complaints over 11 years, the pattern of racial profiling allegations, the multiple incidents that had been closed with insufficient evidence findings. One local news anchor described it as a textbook case of a problem officer that the department tolerated for too long. Tilman was placed on immediate administrative leave, and the department announced an investigation that everyone understood would result in his termination. Marcus Williams contacted attorney Robert Patterson the morning after his arrest. Patterson had already been contacted by civil rights organizations offering to participate in any litigation. Patterson assembled a legal team and filed a civil rights lawsuit 2 weeks later. The lawsuit named Derek Tilman, Lieutenant Sarah Vasquez, the Scottsdale Police Department, and the City of Scottsdale. The complaint was comprehensive and devastating. Asterisk. Violation of Fourth Amendment rights through wrongful arrest without probable cause. Asterisk. Violation of 14th Amendment. Equal protection rights through racial profiling and discriminatory enforcement. Asterisk. Deprivation of civil rights under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983. Asterisk. State law claims for false imprisonment, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Asterisk. Failure to train and supervise officers with documented patterns of racial discrimination. Asterisk. Negligent retention of an officer with 9 complaints involving allegations of racial profiling. The complaint included Tilman's complete personnel record. 9 complaints over 11 years, 3 sustained, and 6 closed with insufficient evidence findings. The pattern was undeniable. Stop after stop, call after call, incident after incident, all following the same formula. The same racial profile, the same bias, the same failures of supervision that allowed the pattern to continue. The complaint also included extensive documentation of how Marcus Williams' arrest had damaged his reputation, created legal fees in excess of $250,000, and caused emotional harm to his family. His arrest record, despite the charges being dropped and the arrest being ruled wrongful, would appear on background checks and internet searches for years. Patients who Googled him would see the arrest. Colleagues would see the arrest. The damage to his professional reputation would be ongoing. The City of Scottsdale's attorneys reviewed the evidence and reached the immediate conclusion that the case was indefensible. The video was clear. The dispatch recording was clear. The witness testimony was clear. Tilman's personnel file was clear. There was no viable defense, no legitimate argument that the arrest had been constitutional or appropriate. The only question was how much the case would cost. Negotiations took 4 months. Patterson pushed aggressively, citing the emotional harm, the professional damage, the violation of civil rights, the clear pattern of supervisory failure that had allowed Tilman to remain on duty despite 9 complaints. The city offered $1.2 million initially. Patterson rejected it as inadequate compensation for a man whose reputation had been damaged and whose professional credibility had been called into question nationally. The final settlement was reached in August 2024, 18 months after Marcus's arrest. The City of Scottsdale agreed to pay $2.4 million to Marcus Williams. The settlement included a requirement that the police department implement new policies on racial profiling, provide mandatory implicit bias training for all officers, and establish an independent civilian review board with subpoena power. The settlement also required that Derek Tilman's name be entered into the National Police Misconduct Registry, marking him permanently as an officer who'd engaged in civil rights violations. Derek Tilman was terminated on the 12th of September 2024, 4 months after the arrest and 2 weeks after the settlement was finalized. The termination letter was definitive. Officer Derek Tilman engaged in racial profiling, made an arrest without probable cause, and violated the constitutional rights of Dr. Marcus Williams. Despite multiple prior complaints involving racial discrimination over 11 years of employment, Officer Tilman continued to demonstrate discriminatory policing practices. His employment is terminated immediately for gross misconduct, violation of civil rights, and repeated pattern of discriminatory conduct despite prior discipline. Tilman's appeal of the termination was rejected by the Civil Service Board after a hearing in which his entire personnel file was reviewed. The board determined that the pattern was undeniable and that Tilman had not improved despite multiple interventions. His 11-year career with the Scottsdale Police Department ended at age 39, permanently marked as an officer who'd violated civil rights. Marcus Williams testified before the Scottsdale City Council in a public hearing held in October 2024, 6 months after his arrest. His testimony was measured, powerful, and devastating. "I'm Dr. Marcus Williams. I'm a cardiac surgeon who's worked at Scottsdale Heart Institute for 19 years. I graduated from Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. I completed a surgical residency at Mayo Clinic. I hold board certification in cardiothoracic surgery. I'm mentioning these credentials not because they should matter, but because they shouldn't have to matter." He paused. "On April 19th, I was arrested for walking home with my wife from a dinner party in my neighborhood. My wife immediately told the officer we were together. A neighbor told him we were married. I showed him my ID with my address on it. And I was arrested anyway because a police officer saw a black man and a white woman and decided the only logical explanation was that a crime was being committed." Another pause. "I've been married 20 years. I've lived in my neighborhood for 20 years. I'm a physician. I'm a homeowner. I'm a taxpayer. I'm a husband and a father. And none of that mattered because Officer Tilman responded to a call that contained no description of any actual crime, just the racial composition of two people, and he decided that was enough." His voice strengthened. "The settlement I received is substantial, $2.4 million. But do you know what that money can't do? It can't undo the mugshot that appears when you search my name. It can't erase the arrest record that will follow me despite the charges being dismissed. It can't restore the dignity of being handcuffed in front of my neighbors. It can't unsay to my children that their father was arrested for walking while black in his own neighborhood." He looked directly at the city council members. Officer Tilman had 9 complaints over 11 years. 9. All involving allegations of discriminatory policing. 3 were sustained. 6 were closed with insufficient evidence despite witness statements and documentation. The question isn't why Tilman arrested me. The question is why your department allowed Tilman to make 9 complaints worth of mistakes before he arrested someone important enough that the arrest would go viral. The council chambers were silent. If this can happen to me with my credentials, my status, my resources, what happens to everyone else? To young black men who don't have lawyers? To people without medical degrees? To people without the resources to fight? This isn't about one officer. It's about a system that permits officers like Tilman to operate unchecked for 11 years. Should police departments be mandated to remove officers after 5 complaints related to racial profiling instead of waiting for the public to demand accountability? Drop your answer. This wasn't just about one officer or one evening in one neighborhood. This was about a department that allowed Derek Tilman to accumulate 9 complaints over 11 years without taking meaningful action, that promoted supervisors who noted concerns but took no disciplinary steps, that treated each incident in isolation rather than recognizing the obvious pattern. The pattern was clear from the beginning. 9 complaints over 11 years. 9. 3 sustained. 6 closed with insufficient evidence despite documentation. The breakdown told the complete story. 8 complaints involving allegations of racial profiling or discriminatory treatment of people of color. 1 complaint involving excessive force during a traffic stop. Every single complaint involved Tilman responding to situations involving people of color in spaces where his biased assumptions told him those people didn't belong. The Scottsdale Police Department paid $2.4 million. That's accountability. Derek Tilman's career is over. That's consequence. His name entered the National Police Misconduct Registry, permanently marking him as an officer who'd engaged in civil rights violations. That's justice. But money doesn't restore dignity. Termination doesn't undo the arrest record. Settlements don't change the underlying system that allowed this to happen. The real question is, What changes now? Does the Scottsdale Police Department finally remove officers after 5 complaints instead of 9? Does command staff finally recognize that claims of insufficient evidence in multiple cases involving the same officer and the same pattern indicates a problem with the officer, not the evidence? Do police departments finally acknowledge that racial profiling doesn't require malice, it only requires assumption, and assumption unchecked by critical analysis becomes violence? Because if we don't fix the system that kept Tilman on patrol for 11 years despite 9 documented complaints, if we don't demand that officers face immediate consequences for pattern behavior rather than individual incidents, then we're just waiting for the next Derek Tilman, the next false arrest, the next viral video, the next family traumatized because a police officer couldn't see past his own bias. Comment if you believe this should be law. Police departments must remove officers from patrol after 3 substantiated complaints related to racial profiling or civil rights violations. Officers with 3 unsubstantiated complaints involving the same pattern of behavior face immediate mandatory retraining and supervision, with removal if the pattern continues. And if you think these stories need to be told, if you believe accountability starts with awareness and change starts with pressure, then hit that subscribe button. We're not stopping. We're going to keep exposing these patterns. We're going to keep demanding accountability. We're going to keep fighting for the Marcus Williamses, the cardiac surgeons, the ordinary people who deserve to exist in their communities, walk down their streets, and spend an evening with their spouses without being criminalized. This isn't just about one officer who made a mistake. It's about a system that tolerated the mistake for 11 years, about communities that called in their biases and expected police to act on them, about neighborhoods built on exclusion that then used police as the tool of that exclusion. It's about all of us in the world we're willing to accept, the accountability we're willing to demand, and the justice we're willing to fight for.